Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Rawiński. The Ukraine peace process has reached another major milestone with a meeting of national security advisors in Kyiv, scheduled to be followed by talks of the coalition of the willing in Paris on the 6th of January. Yet another crucial factor has just emerged, namely the possible volatility of oil prices following the US military action in Venezuela, something that Moscow is watching closely for a number of reasons. So what's the next move for the Ukraine peace talks, and how can events in Caracas change the calculus? Joining us now is McNamee, co-founder of the Ukraine Business News Network. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Would you agree that Russia has reasons to be absolutely terrified of what happened in Caracas?
I wouldn't say terrified necessarily. I would actually say they of course don't like it. They don't want to see an aggressive U.S. foreign policy. They would prefer something far more mild that you saw, say, with Trump's predecessors. And then their calculus that could Trump potentially do something like this in Ukraine or against Russia, which I think Russia understands after the intimate talks we've had for the past year now. That remains relatively unlikely. It shows U.S. capabilities under Trump, what U.S. is willing to do, but applying that to Russia is an entirely different story. So I don't think they're happy about this, of course. I think this does worry them. But at the same time, Russia's definitely going to enjoy the fact that the U.S. has sort of undermined its own talk for years about non-intervention into other countries' sovereignty, respecting other, borders, respecting sovereignty of other nations, which of course Putin did not do when he invaded Ukraine in 2014, then the full-scale invasion in 2022. So I think sort of from the almost soft power side, Russia will with China and others, will be happy to play this up, sort of the illegality of U.S. intervention here in Venezuela, despite the fact that, of course, Maduro was not a democratically elected leader. He clearly lost the elections in 2024. He is a corrupt, kleptocratic, highly repressive dictator. But nonetheless, this was an illegal invasion at the end of the day. And so Russia and China will be focusing on that aspect of it.
But that will be obviously highly hypocritical, with Russia criticizing another country for allegedly illegal military action, not to mention China. Whatever comment China makes right now is likely to age like milk if China decides to move against Taiwan. But let's go back to the Venezuela situation for a number of reasons. Now, one of the reasons could be oil. Even though Venezuela doesn't actually produce much today, it has the world's biggest oil reserves, and a few Russian commentators already said, look, this is the United States now controlling over half of all oil reserves globally, and this is not good news for us, for Moscow. This is what they say. Do you think that they do have a reason to be concerned right now?
So on the oil front, I don't think Russia is as concerned as China is concerned. So yes, I think Russia is to a degree, but I think China, which gets some of their oil from Venezuela, the largest importer of Venezuelan oil, and then you think about Iran and the events going on in Iran as well. And Trump, by the way, has also publicly vowed to intervene in Iran if there's enough violence, and we actually have seen violence now in the last 48 hours. So if U.S. were to also intervene into Iran and into Venezuela, that would seriously impact Chinese imports of oil. Now, that specifically on the price, you're absolutely correct. Russia, of course, short-term and long-term, of course, is for the very obvious reasons, is not going to like this when you think about production. However, Venezuela is producing far less, about a third, basically, about 1 million barrels per day, compared to their capacity, which was observable about 15 years ago or so, of about 3 million barrels per day. It's unanimous amongst the energy analysts out there that it would take tens and tens of billions of dollars to try to increase, and years, by the way, so perhaps in the next decade, to increase that output not to 3 million barrels per day, but to, say, 2 million barrels per day. So realistically, bringing a lot more oil online, even in an optimistic scenario that we restore security, stability to Venezuela, and that political stability allows for increased investment, particularly from American oil firms, to boost that production. You are still years away and significant amount of investment. So as far as bringing a considerable amount of new oil online in a relatively short period of time, that's not really realistic. But yes, over the long-term horizon, let's say 5 years or so, bringing considerably more oil online, and then also politically for the U.S. to be able to continue its role as a swing producer if the U.S. is able to sort of politically control Venezuela's output and exports in the years ahead, then that would be worrying. But as I said, numerous assumptions here, a lot of ifs. There's more questions than answers. This U.S. intervention is only a couple days old, so let's see how all things develop going forward. But as far as specifically the oil price, as of this morning, oil markets interpreted this positively as far as keeping oil prices down. So oil prices actually fell this morning a little bit in the belief that we're going to see this is good for oil supply going forward. So let's see, of course, that's the immediate reaction. Oil prices, as we know, are historically quite volatile. So let's see how things politically develop in Venezuela.
Now, geopolitics is often compared to a game of chess. Now, looking at Russia's side of the chessboard, do you think Russia does actually have reasons to be, feeling a bit uneasy about yet another piece being taken off the board? I mean, we had Bashar al-Assad, first of all. We had the intervention in Iran, now Venezuela, possibly Cuba at some point in the future. We don't know that yet, but there are signals coming from the U.S. administration. These are all, to a greater or lesser extent, Russia's allies.
Right. And that's absolutely true. And so Russia doesn't want to see that. But in the case of Venezuela and Iran, the level of support for Putin's primary objective here, as far as keeping his war machine running in Ukraine, the levels of support from Venezuela and Iran directly were quite minimal. In Venezuela, not really providing anything, Iran providing some, but mostly back in 2022. So there were more ideological allies. They were united in presenting a front politically, rhetorically against the United States and a lot of other Western allies. So losing that, sure, that has an impact. I think if you're sitting in the Kremlin, what they're actually watching for is mission creep. Can the U.S. immerse itself deeper into Venezuela, get Iraq 2.0 type situation, or Cuba, which is the next one, or what Russia's probably really cheering for and watching for is the United States and Trump now shifting his focus back to Greenland once again. And in focusing on Greenland, once Trump feels encouraged after what he believes was a successful policy towards Iran and now a successful policy towards Venezuela, to then feel emboldened and encouraged to then pursue much more aggressively, militarily even, Greenland and annexing Greenland.
Do you think it's likely?
Has made their
I mean, that
policy.
would have been crossing quite a few red lines and quite a few mental barriers, so to say. I mean, this is territory in possession legally of a NATO ally. So do you think that,
exactly,
the US would risk NATO essentially descending into becoming like the CSTO 2.0? Because, I mean, Russia's CSTO is known for not being very cohesive, to say the least.
Correct, right. My answer to you is that I feel certain that there are influential members in Trump's administration who would like to do that and soon, and would have preferred to do that at some point earlier in 2025. So again, as it is with Trump, who has more influence at a certain moment, who's the last person who spoke to him upon leaving a meeting, these things are determinant. But again, I think with Venezuela, if this is still unresolved, he's not going to be moving towards other countries, let's say Cuba or Greenland, until he feels he has a strong foothold with the situation in Venezuela. But as we saw, Stephen Miller's wife just posted on Twitter, basically, our next step is to annex Greenland. Trump himself has publicly said this numerous times. J.D. Vance, in particular, has said there's nothing to discuss. The United States has to have Greenland. So Russia's definitely hoping for something like that. And to answer your question directly, I don't think it's a minimal chance, particularly after now that we've seen Trump test his MAGA base. MAGA's elected him on the sort of belief that Trump, Vance are against endless foreign wars. We're not going to get back involved in the Middle East or anywhere really abroad. Trump in the first year has already abandoned that policy, and he's tested his base here so far, and he's retained popularity within his base, so it's worked. If he feels like this is working with his base and he can retain enough popularity, I do think we should not sort of neglect the relatively high possibility. I can't say it's greater than 50%, but an uncomfortably high likelihood that Trump would move to Greenland, which then you cause, of course, the disruption within NATO, which is what Putin is dreaming of.
But coming back to what Putin really is actually fearing is, the further pressure concerning Ukraine. Now, how does the Ukraine situation look right now? Following what happened in Venezuela, but also following the recent talks, following the announcement that there's going to be a massive financial package for Ukraine over the course of the next 10 years, and the upcoming talks in Paris. What picture emerges from it all right now?
Yeah, and here's an area I think we should, if we're focusing just on Ukraine, we should be optimistic. There's far too much negativity in the Western press about some of these uncomfortable realities that, yes, Trump has taken a different posture towards European allies and NATO than his predecessors. That, of course, European Union should have taken Russia's foreign exchange reserves and given much more financing to Ukraine than they did. But they still did make a nice, strong step forward with the $90 billion loan. So all of these things, if you take them from Putin's point of view, what he still sees in terms of this Western front, a united Western front still, NATO is still, Trump has fallen over backwards since June, the Hague summit in NATO, to continue to reconfirm, and his administration, to reconfirm Article 5 and NATO, the unity of NATO. We're seeing European defense manufacturers, both on the public side, but then also the private players, providing far more aid over the last year. And I know that being on the ground here in Ukraine, we see it coming to Ukraine. So now, really, if you're Putin, this is your absolute nightmare. If you're any Russian leader, Soviet leader, Tsar from the earlier era, this is your absolute nightmare. You have a unified Western front. You have a revived EU spending on defense for the first time in 80 years. You have still a support of the United States with sanctions on. They intensified sanctions in October against the energy sector. You still have the U.S. selling weapons to Europe, which is hard to see why a transactional president in Trump would not want to continue that program and bring in billions of dollars to the U.S. economy. And then on top of that, you have a robust Ukraine that is determined to win this war and reject Russian imperialism. So that front, and that's what the Kremlin's facing, and it should, frankly, for Moscow, get much worse as the West continues to unify, continues to drive up support, while the Russian economy and financial system comes under much worse pressure here, as we're already seeing the last several months, but it's going to intensify quite dramatically over the course of this year.
And do you think that Trump's apparent dissatisfaction with Vladimir Putin, as expressed recently in a comment concerning the current situation of the peace talks, is it likely to have further consequences for Moscow?
I'm getting more optimistic again. Of course, we're kind of reading the tea leaves here and trying to predict exactly how things will play out. But I think a couple of events here, in particular, the fact that Trump, and he has publicly said he doesn't like that Putin lied to him about the fact that he was supposedly attacked in this Ukrainian drone strike, which never happened. And so that's good for Ukraine. And then secondly, we're going to see here, particularly tomorrow, with this coalition of the willing and coming with something to put on paper and to be able to present to Putin here in the coming weeks to say, here is the West's unified terms of the peace talks. Putin will then again have to make a choice. We already know, of course, Putin is going to reject whatever is presented to him. It's not good enough. He's retaining his maximalist demands. So now, in a matter of weeks, Trump, again, in this context of feeling lied to and angry at Putin. And then Putin also, of course, spoke out against the Venezuela intervention, which Trump didn't like naturally. So then when Putin in a couple of weeks rejects this Western offer for peace, I think we are increasing the likelihood that then Trump, again, as he has threatened, we kind of seem to forget amid all the news here, but as he has threatened several times over the last year to actually increase sanctions and intensify the pressure on the Kremlin, as that process has already began, by the way, in October, which again, people tend to forget, but there is some pressure at least coming from the
sanctions on Russian oil companies. Unfortunately, we have to park our conversation here, but hopefully this is the direction that we'll be seeing pursued in the next couple of weeks. Mark McNamee was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And I'm Nash Lewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us.